Councilor Pop, let's go.
Item 15 is a discussion of commission expectations for election review process. Robert Wilson.
Good morning, Commissioners. Robert Wilson with the County Commission Office. As all of you are very aware, and probably everybody in this room is very aware, that soon after election night, a number of you wanted to and reached out to work with Auditor Bob Litz in some way to address some of the concerns and challenges that presented themselves on election night with counting ballots. We've scheduled this as a discussion today because to this point we've heard a lot of different ideas of how that review process might unfold and how you might go about doing that. So the purpose today is to really give you the chance to have the discussion to narrow that focus on a process and decide how you want to go about looking at that, addressing some of the concerns and setting some parameters for that review. Now I know that Commissioner Barth has indicated he had some questions, and I would understand that may be part of your discussion of deciding where you want to address the particular questions. If you want to do that now, or if you want to set parameters for this discussion and the review of what took place, and then answer that as part of that process. So I would, unless you have more questions for me, I would, again, since this is a discussion item today, we turn it over to a commission discussion, and what we in the office would expect is that we would get some direction from the commission today, and then based on that discussion we would bring forward an actionable item for you on an agenda, future agenda, presumably next week, for you to take action on how you would actually proceed with the review. So at that, I would turn it over to the commission for discussion unless there are any particular questions for me.
Any questions for Robert? Commissioner Barth has brought forward a bunch of questions to the commission. I guess I'd like to see an independent review to address issues and concerns that have been reported to us. I think we all know that we had some problems during our election, but this is a time for us to discuss how we want to move forward with the process. Do we want to appoint an independent review board? Do we want to take suggestions from or people who just want to call into the office and ask to be put on it? Do we want to limit the number? What type of people do we want? Do we want staff? Do we want outside? And so this is the time to move forward with suggestions. Commissioner Kelly?
Well, one person I'd like to see involved in this is Chantel Krebs. I think the state is intimately involved in this whole process, and I think, I'm sure Chantel has researched this whole thing, because we're not the only county that had some difficulties. And so I would like to see her as a part of that discussion. I really think we need some citizen representation, but we also need some we need some people that understand the process from the auditor's office.
Commissioner Barrett?
I guess I would say I think that Chantel is certainly a good person to have on that board. But I would like to say that I am a little disappointed that on November 7th, when we did the canvass, I suggested that we record the meeting. We did not. The minutes didn't reflect that we had any discussion. We did have some discussion. And but I was told that we weren't going to do it then, we would do it next week. The next week it was not on the agenda. Now it's not on the agenda either. And I guess apparently there was no plan to have that discussion that I tried to initiate on the 7th. But I think that going forward with the panel is certainly a reasonable thing to do, and I think that we should look for some folks to be on there.
Commissioner Barth, just to respond to that, if you want to lay blame for not being on Tuesday's agenda last week, that was my fault. Since the meeting happened on Friday, it had to be in by Friday afternoon, and I evidently did not verbalize clearly to the staff that's what we wanted. So you can lay blame with me on that one. That's why it was brought up under old business last week, and that's why it was put on the agenda for this week. It is on the agenda, and we are moving forward.
If I may, it's not on the agenda. We're talking about a panel. We're not talking about the election. So we've already moved away from a more intimate discussion of what occurred on election day. But I understand your point. Thank you.
Are there any other suggestions for the discussion review process?
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, I think that it probably should be an independent review. You know, this is another circumstance where we have a wonderful opportunity in the past to try to correct some challenges in previous elections, which didn't necessarily occur here in South Dakota. But, you know, there's a reason why we have a, you know, Help America Vote Act passed in D.C. with the idea that it will enable us all to go ahead and cast our ballots more easily and favorably because of some of the challenges we had going all the way back to the Bush v. Gore election back in the year 2000. And amazingly, here we are today where you're going to see the conservatism in me come out. But we had a process with precincts that quite honestly worked just fine. But some of the problems that we had is reform, going to huge voting centers, which I know a lot of people were advocates of, created a lot of confusion in the voting process. And we've had those discussions here at this table before. And I know that our local partners in government, whether they be the city or the school district, they've actually, you know, gone to the large voting centers. And I can honestly tell you that we've seen problems with those elections. You know, when you have people checking in to vote, whether they're using e-poll books or not, and they turn around and they say, okay, you're in this particular area for this city election. And they turn behind them and they see 18 different ballots that they have to pull the ballots out of that particular correct pile. And I can honestly tell you that we've all heard the complaints from people saying, some guy just grabbed a stack of ballots and went and handed them to them, and they don't know if it was the correct ballots or not. That's a problem. That's a problem, not in the noble effort of having community vote centers, but it's in the practical application of how do we get the correct ballots into the hands of the right people at the time to vote. Those are some of the challenges that we have with this type of reform. And once again, in this last election, same thing occurred. Getting the correct ballots into the people's hands so they can vote at the time with the right ballot at the correct voting place. And you know, some of our concerns going back to the last city election went into the fact that we have legislative districts that straddle both Minnehaha County and Lincoln County. I've never heard a good response from anybody advocating for the community centers for voting that adequately addresses those particular challenges. Because Lincoln County, they have precincts. If Minnehaha County adopted community voting centers, you could have a person that thinks they live in Sioux Falls, south of 57th Street, they go work in Baltic, they can run into any place in Baltic to do their vote, and they will not be allowed to vote because they live south of 57th Street. And so that has not been resolved. There's been no communication that actually addresses that. And so that's going to be a challenge in the future. And what happened last election cycle, we had people showing up at some precincts saying just what Jeff brought up a long time ago. I thought I could vote anywhere. You know, if you send a mixed message out there, if you can vote anywhere and you don't know where anywhere is, then you can't vote. You don't get the opportunity to vote. You're disenfranchised. So, you know, these are noble endeavors to try to expand the opportunity of people to vote. Now you can absentee vote 6 weeks prior to a general election or primary, which is wonderful. It opens up opportunities. We've had a huge increase in the number of absentee ballots that we have to count. But amazingly, what happens? You set that down on the counter, and before you know it, somebody's putting their coffee on it. Somebody's putting their mac and cheese on it. This has become a placemat in a bird cage, and you pull it out, and now you have to vote with it. And we get surprised because, guess what? Our computer systems will flag those ballots if they don't come through because of the discrepancies that are picked up by the city. So I think it's a noble effort, but I think we have to go back to what worked in the past. And I think an independent review is necessary, getting back to my original statement, because I think we need not only our Secretary of State or recently elected Secretary of State, she needs to have her hand in the process. I think we need to have our auditor also in that process. And I think we need independent people in our community to go ahead and to make these kind of suggestions. to all the different local entities of government. I think it'll have a better reception. And if they want to have people involved in this process as well, great. But I think they also need to understand that, voting centers may be cheaper, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get a better result. And I think the goal is to have the best result we can get, not cheaper. And so that's just my 2 cents.
Commissioner Kelly?
Unless Gerald has a comment, I'd like to float a motion.
We can't have a motion, this is discussion only.
Not-
No, this is a discussion only. Commissioner Benega, do you have any comments?
Unfortunately, I didn't hear all of that, getting some background noise, but I agree that the process is more important than the question of speed. We want accuracy and we want independence. So I think the information that John has just presented is part of the process, but we need to go to the experts, not only with the people who are responsible for the process, but also to the vendor who is responsible in providing a product that works, and we are trained adequately to make sure that that process does work. So I think we've got multiple issues on the board, and I think they need to be done independently, as John suggested. And I think we need to do it as quickly as possible, but not necessarily as fast as some people need it done. We've got some time to reflect and make sure that that process is correct, and I think we need to do that as quickly as possible, get that process moving, and hope for a result that everybody can agree on will avoid the majority of the problems. I don't know that we'll ever have a perfect system with multiple precincts, multiple counties, multiple cities, multiple school districts, and hope to have no issues. I think that's not going to be possible.
Commissioner Kelly?
Okay, I'd like to try floating a suggestion.
Suggestion.
That the chair appoint a blue ribbon panel with consent of the commission to look at this. We do have a time frame, although the school board election, I think there will be a school board election this year because of the start date petition. But we've got we've got some time to look at this, and I think a good panel, and I think within the chair's prerogative to appoint that panel, would get this ball, we'll get this thing rolling.
Do you have any suggestions on how many people we should limit this panel to? I mean, we don't want to put 200 people on this group.
I would put 7 on it.
7 people on the panel? Are
And
there any other suggestions?
I'm not sure any elected official should be on it. I think, we will obviously, as well the auditor, have an interest in it, but I think it's important that we get some experts in the field.
Are there any other suggestions, Commissioner?
I wonder if
Clark?
we couldn't have Chantel plus auditor, plus 1 from each of us.
Does the commission feel about having one commissioner sit on this board?
Well,
Oh, no, that's not what you meant?
no, I meant, I would nominate someone and Commissioner Kelly would nominate one. And then we have Secretary of State-elect Krebs and our own auditor on the panel.
Okay, I still didn't quite understand what you meant.
Okay, well, it would
Yeah,
be,
tell me
let's
again.
say that I wanted to have Pete Harriman be on the panel, and that would be my nominee. And then, John would maybe pick, Pam Nelson or something, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Just, so there'd be 5 that we would pick, and 2 that would be kind of automatically in there, our auditor and our Secretary of State-elect.
Commissioner
I
Carroll?
would just suggest maybe that instead of the auditor and the Secretary of State, that they have a nominee. One, I don't know that Chantel's going to have the time to be on a panel. She's going to have plenty of work to do when she gets up there. 2, I think this is, advisory to us and hopefully to the auditor. So I would say, in the absence of any commissioner, the auditor maybe should have someone on there that they appoint, will probably be.
Commissioner Beckett?
We have a past establish precedent when we've done this before. I think the county efficiency committee that we had originally, you were the designee for Carroll. I think Doug Hoffman was my designee. You guys met very, very consistently and made a recommendation. I think that's what we're kind of visioning here. We have a history of doing that in the past, so I understand exactly what you're saying.
Are we going to take public interest into consideration by having people call the auditor's office, or do we just want to appoint? I mean, that was another thing that was thrown out to Commissioner Kelly.
I think the point.
Okay, so at this point.
I think that's what we're hired to do, and I think, yeah, you'd have a lot of applicants and stuff, but I think just if each commissioner appoints, like Jeff suggested, plus the other two would either be automatic or be appointees or nominees, I would think that'd be a cleaner way to do it. People can express an interest, there's no question about that.
Commissioner Beckers?
I really think it's important to have individuals that are at least educated and schooled in the process, and the reason why is because it would be very, very disappointing if we had an independent agency or an independent commission that was reviewing this pattern of practice saying, well, let's just vote by internet. That's just not realistic. I think we need to have the confines of what the expectation under HAVA and federal election law as well as state law be in the mix here. Free thinking is great, but we have to be within the confines of what's permissible for legal elections.
Commissioner Benninger, do you have any comments?
Well, I think that the group to be operational has to be somewhere in that 7 to 11 range, obviously with an odd number if we need it. But more importantly, I think that we again get representation from the state, from the county, from people that have used the system in the past, and it's about the process. It's not about the results of the election at this point. It's about getting to the point where we know that the information we're getting is accurate, and I think that's more about users than anybody else. So appointing someone from each of the county commissioners is probably possible. I guess I would want some qualifications besides just someone who's agitated with the system. That's not a qualification from my standpoint. It's an operational issue, so let's try to stick with it being an operational independent review if we could.
So what I'm hearing from you is that we would appoint 7 people, 5, each commissioner would appoint 1 person. We could have the auditor's office appoint 1 person, and Chantel Krebs, either herself or to appoint someone in her capacity to represent her at those meetings.
I'm comfortable with that.
Are you comfortable with that, Chuck?
Commissioner, yes, if I may though, I think that we should have at least a cursory review of everyone's appointees.
Oh, I agree. It'll end up coming back. Time frame, what do we want for the time frame for those appointees to come, to be brought back to act on? Because we're going to have to have it on the agenda to approve that panel once we've appointed those. So how much time do we need
30 days.
for the panel?
To appoint the panel?
To appoint the panel?
You think that should
I thought-
long, be quick?
It seems like kind of a long time. Commissioner Practice, any comments on time frame?
Well, I was just going to say, one concern you're going to have is that whoever I designate, if it's within the time frame, the new commissioner that the commission selects, obviously, that's not their designee. But given the fact that we're going to have that discussion next week, the longer we wait, even with a vacancy on the commission, I think it's really important that we move while the election's fresh. I think we need to go ahead and make our designation.
Yeah, I don't,
Should we shoot
the
for?
future commissioner,
Don't
at this
wait.
point, this is
Yeah.
our
This is-
government.
So do we think that we can get these people together within a week, or do we need 2 weeks, 1 week?
Give 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Commissioner Benninger, do you have a thought on that? We're going both ways.
Frankly, I'm going to need 2 weeks. I know you think I got lots of time in my hands, but the real issue is that I don't know that everybody's going to step up to the plate that you're going to ask who wants to be involved in this. So it may take us more time to find someone that we feel that understands the operation and the legalities more than the other issues.
So are we in agreement that we could in 2 weeks bring this back to the agenda with a panel?
I agree.
I would agree with 2 weeks.
Okay, we'll go with 2 weeks, and this panel is to basically look at some of the questions that have been raised and the concerns, and to make this a safe election again, and bring this back to the commission, and we can probably address further next week, in 2 weeks, as to what we want this panel to accomplish. Are we all right with that? All right. Right, so move forward here to...
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on.